Welcome to another scriptural study. We kindly suggest that you put your computer screen on full view. And as always, please feel free to critique these scriptural studies by responding to this YouTube video in the comments section with 2 or 3 scriptural witnesses, along with historical, etymological, archaeological, and/or astronomical evidence as it relates to the scriptural subject matter being shared. Enter as well our email address or Facebook page. In this scriptural study, we will share the incredible and blatant erroneous differences of man's sun clocks as compared to our Almighty YaHUaH and His celestial clock that is both revealed in the very word itself, let alone presents itself in the heavens day after day and night after night. Because many to this very day will adamantly and erroneously state that the sun alone gives us the only direction to tell time. And along with this comes the biggest age-old lie ever from man, that the sun itself can only tell us when a new year begins. But the scriptures do not state this, because the celestial clock in the heavens proves what YaHUaH, the Father of lights, provides with His celestial clock, which has 3 components, with the sun, moon, with the stars, which can be seen working in complete and unified harmony to tell time, let alone when and how the true beginning of the scriptural year astronomically reveals itself. No one would dare argue that man has no problem trusting a human-made clock with its 3 components of a second, minute, and hour hand, all measuring different elements, but, when combined, provide a system to tell time, even though this man-made system and/or device needs to be adjusted at times and repaired on occasion. So why then does man not trust YaHUaH and His celestial clock with its 3 components of the sun, moon, with the stars, all measuring different elements, but when combined provide the most reliable system of telling time ever created for days, months, and years, knowing that it needs no adjustments or intercalation from man, and never needs to be repaired? This is the purpose and intent of this study, to reveal just how amazing, and yes, even extremely fascinating, that all through history, man has had an innate intrinsic drive to worship the sun, let alone utilizing it on its own as a timepiece of veneration. And thus, man forgoes the celestial clock and calendar system of the Almighty YaHUaH. But wait a minute, you might say. Is it really true that people worship and/or venerate the sun? Isn't the truth on any subject based on something truly being the case, which can be empirically supported by proven facts with real things and events? So is it really true that people all through time expressed in physical actions and conscious thought a reverence to the sun as being a supernatural power? Have people all through time created and instituted forms of worldwide religious practices, creeds, and rituals around the sun? And can it empirically be proven that people all through time have shown extravagant respect and admiration for the sun, in which people are motivated to devote themselves to this object of esteem, let alone use it alone for telling time? Isn't it great that we still have dictionaries that can still provide the true definitions of words and the contextual meanings behind them? And isn't it even more wonderful that archaeology reveals over and over again how the stones indeed cry out on just what people reverenced with their world religious rituals, showing their extravagant respect and admiration for their sun objects of esteem that they utilized for telling time as well? And isn't it even more wonderful that the scriptures knew well in advance that dictionaries and archaeology would eventually expose the silence of men and how they esteemed and adored the process of sun worship, let alone utilizing the sun alone as a timing device? Do your own research as it relates to Babylon and its non-scriptural practices of sun worship that exist to this very day. Study and find out why church buildings of today carry the same timing symbols of esteem from Egypt with their sun pillars, let alone why Egypt erected them originally. And or why the Greeks revered Mithras with his solar halo, and why the Romans worshipped Helios, their version of the ongoing pagan sun deities. The stones do indeed cry out, with an extensive and incredible amount of evidence, don't they, on just how non-scriptural all of this is. But it gets worse. Just look at the massive monuments that have been built at great cost with painstaking human effort facilitated by the pagan priesthood of the time all through history, just to show this reverence, adoration, and esteem to this object in the sky. Even people today gather annually at a non-scriptural pagan man-made clock and calendar device known as Stonehenge, located on the Salisbury Plain in England. And worse yet, they say this man-made device had Druidic Celtic priests telling everyone this was when the beginning of the year was, because the sun was in perfect alignment to the Stonehenge device on the vernal equinox, just as it is being practiced today in the same location. And so it goes, as per the scriptural quote, "There is nothing new under the sun." Even the Roman Emperor Hadrian knew how to wow an audience, as he helped to finalize the completion of the pagan man-made sundial device known today as the Pantheon in Rome. Many archaeologists now believe the Pantheon was designed as a sundial with its circular ocular opening shedding beams of light to mark the passage of time, with the intent to emphasize the emperor's divine power as he entered in the building on key dates of the year, again being the vernal equinox, and as well on the pagan date April 21st, which was celebrated as the founding date of Rome, because the sunbeams would be striking the metal grill above the doorway, flooding the courtyard outside with light. These dramatic entrances by the Emperor Hadrian on these key dates would have been seen by the Romans in regards to having control over the sun, let alone heavens, which helped to elevate him into the realm of their false deities, helping to deceive and further overwhelm the naive masses of the emperor's false divine power. I have personally traveled to the majority of these places shared in this video, and the practice of building and aligning stones with the movement of the sun for the equinox and solstices even occurred with the native tribes from where I originate in northern Ontario. Imagine how the priests of the time known as medicine men and shamans wowed the various Native American tribes with their version of a man-made timing piece magic show. And even today there is a man-made craze to build yourself a vernal equinox magic show finder, so to speak. But where in Scripture did it ever say we had to build anything to tell time, let alone build something to identify seasons? It states the opposite, doesn't it? And where does Scripture ever state that we were to build sun worship temples? Scripture shares the opposite, doesn't it? Because none of this, all through time, was scriptural, just like it is not scriptural today. In fact, believers in the way and the set-apart way of YaHUaH way back when were instructed to eradicate these man-made sun worship centers, let alone equinox and solstice magic show structures. But man is stubborn. he, in his rebellion and disbelief of the word, continues to erect these non-scriptural edifices for time and sun worship rituals up to this very day. So, are there any scriptural passages that speak to identifying and measuring the vernal equinox to be a key indicator in identifying the start of a scriptural new year? And or any scriptural reference as it relates to the summer solstice, fall equinox, and or winter solstice? Because false claims are still being made today by proponents of the non-scriptural equinox calendar start of the year theory, that the word equinox actually appears in the Tanakh. They are referring to the word tekufa or tekufa, which appears in the Hebrew scripture 4 times. Tekufa is in fact the post-scriptural word for equinox. However, it never has the meaning of equinox in the Tanakh. To claim that the word tekufa means equinox in the Tanakh just because it had this meaning in later Hebrew is what is known as an anachronism, which means someone and or something existing out of their proper time in history, as per the examples in this visual. This emphasizes how important it is to understand Scripture in its historical and linguistic context, and why words, names, and the law extremely matter even in this day and age, just as the Scriptures share over and over again. Because in scriptural Hebrew, tekufa retains its literal meaning of circuit. That is something which returns to the same point in time or space and or to go around, as in a repetitive cycle and or turn and or turning of the year, like in the agricultural cycle as an example. So it is no coincidence that the celestial clock and calendar of YaHUaH, with the sun, moon, with the stars working in perfect harmony, tells us when the true beginning and starting point of a scriptural year begins. Because the appointed times of YaHUaH represents his spiritual harvest cycle and or annual circuit, which is in alignment with creation's agricultural cycle and or circuit. There is no need to follow what man does with its sun worship practices of telling time, because the appointed times with YaHUaH and his celestial clock ensures one and all are always in their proper season, timely, without fail, year after year. People in the way of YaHUaH trust Scripture and verify it in creation, with the sun and moon, with the stars of YaHUaH's celestial clock, to teach them how to number and or count their days, and as such, ignore man and their non-scriptural sun worship temples and their non-scriptural practices of monitoring and measuring the sun alone for telling time. The first appearance of the post-scriptural Hebrew word tekufa is in the book of Shemoth or Exodus chapter 34 verse 22, which refers to the agricultural character of the festival of booths or Sukkot, which reads, quote, "And the festival of ingathering at the agricultural circuit and or cycle and or turn of the year known as Tekufat Hashanah," end of quote. The same also appears in a parallel passage in the book of Shemoth or Exodus chapter 23 verse 16, which describes Sukkot as follows, quote, "And the festival of ingathering at the going out of the year, or known as Tzet Hashanah, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field," end of quote. A third scriptural witness comes to us of this agricultural ingathering as described in the book of Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 16 verse 13. Quote, "Perform the festival of booths for 7 days, after the ingathering from your threshing floors and from your winepress," end of quote. The festival of booths or ingathering is described as the going out of the year because it takes place at the end of the yearly agricultural cycle. Being misled by the post-scriptural Hebrew meaning of Tekufah to this day is extremely erroneous from a scriptural standpoint. In fact, this anachronistic reading leads to the suggestion of fixing the beginning of the year incorrectly, so that Sukkot, the festival of ingathering, falls at the time of the autumnal equinox. However, a closer investigation, as we have seen, shows that the circuit of the year has nothing to do with any equinox and or solstice time period. And besides, when did a true believer in the way of YaHUaH want to have anything to do with what happens with the practices of pagan Gentiles? The post-scriptural Hebraic term Tekufah also appears in Tehillim, or the Book of Psalms, chapter 19, verses 5 and 6, in reference to the sun. But here, too, it has nothing to do with the equinox and or solstices, but rather another wonderful example of when a true scriptural day begins, let alone other wonderful scriptural truths. The same expression, circuit and or turn of the year, is also used to refer to events which take place in late spring, as we see in the book of Chronicles, book 2, chapter 24, verse 23, quote, "And it came to be at the turn of the year that the army of Aram came to Yehuda and Jerusalem," end of quote. In this instance, the word Tekufah, or circuit, or turn of the year, comes in place of the common expression return or teshuvah of the year, which appears several times in the Tanakh as the time when kings go out to war in late spring, when the roads were passable again after the spring rains had dried up, as in the book of Samuel, book 2, chapter 11, verse 1, etc. Only in post-scriptural Hebrew did Tekufah come to mean equinox, and or solstice only to some. And to read this meaning into the Tanakh creates an anachronism as shared previously. But we have no doubt that people all over the earth who have a desire to remain in it and its world religions in all of their various forms of sun worship will continue to flock to pagan temples and structures of sun worship, and will stubbornly persist with an innate drive to say the beginning of the year is at the vernal equinox. And yes, some will say the autumn equinox, even though this is so easily proven to be conclusively non-scriptural. And we have no doubt people who have a desire to remain in the world and its world religions will continue to ignore the celestial clock of YaHUaH, with its three components, with the sun, moon, with the stars, that work in perfect celestial harmony to tell proper time. A very worldly educated individual continues to tell us that he counts 6 sunsets to know when the Sabbaths are, even though he has yet provided 3 scriptural witnesses, 3 historical witnesses, or 3 astronomical witnesses, proving this is anywhere close to a scriptural approach, let alone how to know when the first day of the first month is scripturally. We constantly respond to individuals like this. Don't work so hard to sustain what the world and its world religions provide in regards to false and erroneous time measurement worship systems. Because YaHUaH and His Word is trustworthy about His celestial clock that has 3 components, with the sun, moon, with the stars to tell perfect time, in order to know when the first day of the first month is, along with all of the appointed times, new moon days, and Sabbath days, in their proper seasons, without the aid of man and its world religions. Again, think. Would anyone ever utilize a man-made clock with only a second hand alone, and or a minute hand alone, and or an hour hand alone to tell time? Yes, everyone utilizes all 3 components of a man-made clock that measures separate elements, but when brought together provide a method to meet a scheduled appointment timely. So if man can trust a faulty man-made timing machine that breaks and always needs adjustment, with its three man-made components, why then can't he trust the most reliable timing piece ever created that has three celestial components that never need adjustment and or intercalation by men, let alone repairs? Who will you trust more moving forward, YaHUAH or man? Remember, man's devices always need adjustment and a repair. YaHUaH's do not. We continue to pray in the name which is above all names that these scriptural studies provide value to you and your loved ones. As always, thank you for allowing us to share in the name which is above all names. Till next time, YaHUaH willing, all the best.